NJ.com and the Heldridge Hotel. Welcome to the Rutgers Rant, your one-stop podcast for the Scarlet Knights. With your host, Steve Politi, and Rutgers insider Brian Fonseca. Let's start shopping.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Rant. Both here. I don't know about you, Brian. I've moved from the outrage stage from Saturday's loss to Oregon to the acceptance resignation stage, which is basically where my usually default position for covering this team. Acceptance, can't control it. Resignation, didn't find a better career earlier in life. Here I am. So that's where I'm at with this one, 56-10 loss. I mean, I don't know how much we should break down the actual game itself. 750 yards sort of speaks for itself.
Yeah. That's a problem in and of itself, is that we're back at a point where Rutgers loses a game so badly, gets dominated so thoroughly that we're like, it's not even worth talking about, right? This is the 2016, 2017 era where you go into a game expecting Rutgers to lose, and it's not a question of, are they going to lose by, are they going to put up a fighter, but how much they're going to lose by, right? And again, we talked about this on Saturday when your head was about to explode, when it was just boiling with anger. But we thought we were beyond these kinds of losses, right? And I guess in a vacuum, it's not unprecedented for a team to get their butts whooped by a top 10 team like this. It happens not often, but it's not unprecedented in college football. But I understand the anger because it's just a continuation of a season where this program is going backwards, where in 2023, 2 years ago, they host number one Ohio State with a team that has no quarterback, has no real receivers to talk about, has one playmaker offensively in Kyle Monangai, but they have a really good defense. They hang in there with Ohio State. They're probably never going to win that game, but you're in the fourth quarter, one-score game with Ohio State, and you feel like, okay, this is a complete reversal of where Rutgers was 10 years ago. Yeah. Rutgers is making progress. Last year, they blow an opportunity at a standout year. They go to a bowl game, but ultimately, for whatever all the reasons we could discuss, 7-6 is the final record. And as Greg said Saturday, you are what your record says you are. Last year felt like a plateau at best. And now you're 3-4. You lose your first 4 Big Ten games. You lose 3 games to Big Ten teams. They're not bad Big Ten teams, but they're not the upper echelon teams. You should win at least one of those games. You go 0-3, and then you get your ass absolutely whooped, just destroyed. And don't take that from me. Take it from Jordan Walker, captain of this team, who is as honest as a player I've ever talked to after a game. And now you're 0-4 and you're facing down the barrel of missing a bowl game and taking a step back, and you're 6 of Greg Schiano. So I understand the existential dread that you and Rutgers fans are facing right here, because it's not looking great.
Yeah, and thank God for Jordan Walker. It's and at the start of the fourth quarter, we get Jimmy Gill from the Rutgers Sports Information Office comes to us with a legal pad, a blank page, to ask us for our player requests for people we want to talk to, and we both look at each other like, I don't want to talk to a player. I don't, it's like there's absolutely no one I hear that I want to have them address this game. This is a coaching failure. This is a Greg Schiano failure. This is not on any individual player. But they brought the captains, they brought Jordan Walker, and he was just so honest. Like, I'm sick to my stomach. And the way he framed it, like, I had never thought that was a real thing. Like, it was funny. Like, he was just discovering that a life experience could make you sick to your stomach, and he was so honest for him. Thank God for that burst of honesty. I thought Gus Lingus again. He was the same way. I thought we were done with games like this. That was he was honest about it, and I did too. And I keep on coming back to that. Like, we're back to the just suck normal stage of Rutgers football. Like, I thought then that if you're new to the pod, that's, the conversation we had with Chris Ash back in the day, where it's like, okay, we don't, no one expects you to beat Michigan yet. You can't 78-0 it, right? You can't, no one expects you to beat Oregon. But my phone was buzzing with people who were looking at the box score. 750. I got that texted to me 3 times. On Saturday night, people who just saw that were like, wait, what happened? It's just, then you look at the highlights and it's just guys wide open, running free in the field, not setting the edge. I mean, Brian, the highlight you put on our X feed for the Rutgers Rant, where you've got the two defensive backs, look like they're fighting over, where to eat, just like raising their hand. You got the clip here if you're watching on YouTube. I mean, it just out sort of loud about it, like, as I said, here it is. This is great. What's going on?
So here's the thing, right? Like when they were getting destroyed 10 years ago, it was a combination of a coach completely over his head, but also with a complete lack of talent he was working with, in large part because of the players that he recruited, right? Where I think this is not a product exactly of lack of talent, right? I think this team is more talented than certainly the Chris Ash teams, and I think a majority of the teams that Greg has had in 2.0. But when you have guys not knowing where to be, yelling at each other very demonstratively on the field, I think it's very clear that guys don't have a grasp of where to be defensively. And it's not the first time it's happened this season. It's not like because Oregon was running these exotic offensive, formations, which I thought was a bit much. I'm told Oregon does that all the time, but I just feel like you don't have to pull out all the stops against Rutgers when you are dominating them straight up. But anyway, so the question here is this because Robb Smith, the defensive staff, and all the new and experienced coaches on the staff are not getting through to the players? Is it because the players are not watching film and doing their part to understand the scheme? Because these are the same guys playing every week. They're not switching guys up. They're playing a very small rotation, to steal a basketball term here. So is it a combination of both? I don't know, but Jordan Walker and Greg Schiano, to an extent, were saying they have to figure out what the issue is here. And I can't remember if Greg used this expression. I don't think he did, but Jordan Walker essentially said, you got to be a man and you got to take ownership of this and you got to get better. I just don't know if there's a fix here, though. I don't know. And listen, we talk about this now. Everyone wants Greg to just fire Robb Smith. I don't think that's a solution. I think it would make everyone feel better. And honestly, they can get worse. So maybe a temporary relief might be a good change in emotions at this point in the year. But I mean, it's Monday. We're recording this at 9:40. Greg did push back his press conference a day, which is very unusual. But it's 9:40, and we have received no indication as of right now that Robb Smith is no longer the defensive coordinator at Rutgers. So I don't think they're going to make a change. So I don't know what they could possibly do to fix what looks like. I don't know if it's the worst defense Greg has had at Rutgers. I broke down the numbers, but it's certainly one of the 3 or 4 worst defenses he's had, including the first 2 defenses he had where he took over the worst program in the country.
Oh, yeah, it's no question. It's one of them. It's certainly by any, if you're just measuring where the program is, you almost have to dismiss the first couple. But 119th in national scoring defense, 129th in total, 473 yards a game, 128th in passing defense. I mean, 135th. I didn't know there were that many teams in rushing defense. It just goes on and on. Yards allowed per carry, 6.2. We can't win games like that. I mean, it's just it's an embarrassing defense. The Robb Smith thing, we've talked about this, and it's, I was having a conversation with someone about this, and just the idea, like, well, they have to fire Robb Smith, right? And I'm like, well, firing Robb Smith makes Greg look bad. And the response back to me was any worse than that defense made him look bad? It's like, oh, good point. I think it's like ultimate save face move. You're firing a guy essentially in less time than it took you to hire him at this point, right? Because, it took you forever. It took you 7 months to finally make that hire to bring in Robb Smith. The whole reason was we need a guy to run my defense. Okay, well, maybe you should have looked outside the box. Maybe you should have looked inside yourself and said, is that what I need? Or do I need fresh ideas on defense? Do I need someone who's going to come in here and try to make things work in a different way? That I'm not using the same, principles and strategies I was using in 2006. Maybe that would have been a good idea. And to me, I thought it at the time, and I didn't write it, but I thought it was that hire was illustrative of one of my greatest fears when I was advocating for Greg Schiano. Is he out of ideas? Is this a man who's kind of like, all right, we're going to go back. We're going to keep chopping. We're going to use the same things we used before. is he possible for him to adapt to the college game? And you bring him Robb Smith, you bring in a guy you fired once before, twice before. I don't even know the guy you've had recycling your coaches. To me, it was a shining example of that fear coming to life. And now you're seeing it play out. If he has to fire him in midseason, and that's what's happening behind the scenes, it is a terrible sign, even if it's the right thing to do.
So just to push back on because there's been some confusion about like how Robb Smith ended up being at Rutgers for a third time, right? So the number one candidate this offseason when they had to make a DC hire was Corey Heatherman. He was Joe Harris-Simiak's linebackers coach, which was with him for a long time. He was the linebackers coach of that 2023 defense where they were really, really good. And then he went to Minnesota to become their DC in 24, and he was really good as a DC there. And he had previously been really good as a DC at James Madison. So he was the number one target. PJ Fleck, tired of having his entire program essentially stolen below him by Greg Schiano every year, gave Corey Heatherman a contract extension in December, raised his salary, raised his buyout. They were talking about him after their bowl game that he was going to stay. Corey Heatherman himself said he was going to stay. And then Miami in January swooped in and paid his $600,000 buyout and gave him a significant raise, right? So that's how he ended up going from Minnesota to Miami. I don't know if Rutgers couldn't pay the buyout, which was $600,000, though I think it was a little higher for Big Ten teams, or they couldn't match the salary that he's making at Miami. The point being, Corey Heatherman would have been the home run hire. They went for Corey Heatherman. They didn't get Corey Heatherman. And it's not like Robb Smith was option number 2. They did talk to other candidates. They did try to get other candidates. For one reason or another, they ended up getting option Z, which was Robb Smith, right? I just don't think, and it's reasonable to think that Robb Smith was at any point a guy Greg wanted. I think it was the guy that Greg got, right? And pairing him with Zach Sparber, up and coming young defensive coach, was the resolution to that issue, right? So you get a guy that you fired twice, but you have a guy that he's going to mentor. And clearly, I think in hindsight, it was pretty obvious that how much they've struggled as a defense under Robb Smith in the past, how much Robb Smith defenses have struggled in the past in other schools he's been in. The fact he was an analyst at Penn State when they got him and not a defensive coordinator somewhere else was a clear sign that this was not a strong hire. I just don't think
someone who can go up to Greg Schiano and say, you can't hire this guy. Where's that person in this organization who says, you can't bring him back? Are you crazy? Like, there's no one who can say that to Greg Schiano. Like, there's no.
What's the alternative?
I don't know, but you pay him $1 million. They're not.
How
many college coaches are out there?
They're paying him $750,000, and they're paying They took essentially what they were going to pay Joe Harris-Simiak in half.
Exactly. But there is more than $1 million. It's not like it's the old days and this was a problem in Greg Schiano 1.0 when they did not have the money to retain staff and you lost assistants all the time. And you kind of show, what are you going to do? Someone's willing to pay him more. He's got to think about his livelihood. But it's like, I get it. Corey Heatherman got a better job. He's Miami's DC. Like you couldn't pry him away from, there's got to be other human beings out there. I just don't understand what happened. It just looks terrible. It's just like a really bad look for the program that this was the best you could do. Everyone was screaming about it when it happened. Like the fan base knew, people who follow the program, like this is a bad idea. We are 7 weeks in, the team's 3-4, the defense stinks out loud. And now you're like, we got to fire him. I mean, it's just a really this is the kind of stuff that gets coaches fired. It's just a really bad overall look. That they're gonna have to, if that's what's happening behind the scenes, Brian. Yeah,
I look okay. It's 9:45 now on Monday morning. Nothing has changed, but I would be surprised if nothing changes. Right? I don't know if Robb Smith's gonna get fired or not, but there should be. If there isn't, it's probably not a great sign. But there should be some sort of reassignment, some changes, anything, play calling, moving, because you can't have one of the worst defenses in the country and a defense that just got historically lit up. 750 yards. I don't know definitively because I can't find the box score for the 1888 Princeton game where they lost 82-0. But it's got to be, if not the highest, the second or third highest yardage given up by a defense in program history. Greg Schiano looked absolutely pissed off. I can't think of a better way to put it at the podium Saturday. There's got to be some sort of changes. So we'll see. But I guess the broader point here is like, let's play this out. This applies to the Robb Smith situation, and it applies to the I like to call them now the lunatic fringe of the people that want to fire Greg Schiano, which I don't think they're crazy, to be clear. I totally understand the frustration boiling to a point where people are legitimately doing that, but we have to be realistic here. and realize that there is no feasible way unless a fairy with $1 billion comes down and pays them to do it. It's not going to happen. But anyway, let's game out the Robb Smith thing. Let's say they do in 5 minutes fire Robb Smith. What is the next step? Like, what are they going to do? How does that help the situation?
Right. It can't be. You don't trust Zach Sparber to run the defense. I mean, I can look at the list of coaches. I don't see anybody. Do you bring someone in from the outside? Is that a possibility? Is there someone that you can have hire? I mean, that doesn't seem, and that's going to work. I think it's got to be Greg who's doing it. But why is he not already doing it? Right? Like, you should have done that at the bye week. I thought that he was going to take it over. He's already in the meetings. I don't know that firing Robb Smith solves anything mid-season the way it did sort of with Sean Gleason. Like, thinking back on that one where we made the change because you thought he wasn't playing complementary football is what they said at the time. You could switch to who was it then? Campanelli, right? When you fired Gleason, you could run a more conservative kind of offense that's not trying to do anything, just trying to protect the ball, trying to let the defense win games that year. I don't know that there's a way. Something that's going to work the same defensively. Do you think there's a miracle cure here? I don't see it.
I don't. It's a rough part of the year too, because when they fired Sean Gleason, it was at a bye week. The bye week this year the second bye week is in November. You're coming up on the most important stretch remaining in the season where you have to beat Purdue, if not to make a bowl game, to save your pride and not be looked at as the worst team in the Big Ten. And you have a chance against Illinois and Maryland after that, obviously. So no, and then just like logistically, to me, it doesn't make sense to fire the guy because you're going to have to pay him the rest of his contract, right? The rest of this year and next year. And to fire him in the middle of the season helps nothing. I would just push him over to special teams or make him do something else on the defense, whether it's breaking down film of a specific action, because you're going to pay the guy anyway, right? So I just don't see, unless the things are so bad, and I don't think it's at this point, to be clear, but they're so bad that it would galvanize the entire locker room to get rid of the guy, right? Unless you're at that situation, I just don't see how that would help other than some temporary relief from some pressure you're feeling from the outside. Right. Now, if you do keep Robb Smith, which again seems like the more likely scenario, to your point, I think that it's going to be the solution they had at the bowl game, which is Greg Schiano calls the defense. He just has a bigger role in the defense and makes the tweaks himself. Or I don't know if the defense is too complicated and that's why guys don't know where to be. I don't know if there's just so many new faces. They're having a hard time getting through to everybody, but maybe just simplify things. Maybe just make things as simple as possible where guys can just play free, where they're not yelling and pointing at each other to decide where to be. And they can just focus on swarming to the ball. And, I just, again, it can't get worse than this. It really can't. It's hard to imagine it getting worse than this. So maybe just dumb things down.
If Purdue gets 750 yards, I think we know one way it could get worse. I don't think that's going to happen, but I mean, there's a word you shouldn't say. Covered Rutgers a long time. You should never say it can't get worse. That's something that's a concern. You mentioned this, and I do want to play the puzzle it out game here with and I won't call it the lunatic fringe. I will call it the done with Greg camp, like people who are just done with it. And I get it. I do. Like, I think there's some people who thought this was a bad idea in the first place 6 years ago. I think they believe that they're being proven right. So I think there is a frustration. I don't know what percentage of the fan base is based on my inbox. I mean, it might be half the fan base at this point. I'm not getting a lot of you're being too rough here emails after these games. I'm getting mostly, why are they firing them? And so I think that's what I want to try to answer that question. And you mentioned it, like when you see these mid-season firings, I think they all follow a very similar format or timeline where the fan base is done with a coach. They lose a game like this, like a bad game in a string of bad games. The trajectory, the arrow is pointing down. And the minute that's a Florida State, a bad example, they didn't do it. But a minute like these big programs, the arrow starts pointing down. It's when, a group of 10, half dozen, could be one influential donor, go to the president, go to the athletic director and say, I'm paying we got to get rid of this guy. And the AD says, all right, well, you're going to have to write the check. And they do. Like, I think that's how it happens in a lot of these places. And that's why it's not happening here. The last time Rutgers fired a coach mid-season, it was Chris Ash. They owed him $10 million. They're still paying it a couple of years ago. I mean, the they ate the money. It was just written off on the ledger. You could see it. Coaching salary, there's no one coming in here to write the check to get rid of Greg Schiano, and it's $23 million. And my problem with people who say just fire him, well, you're not puzzling it out because you have to fire the staff too, and that's a few million, and then you have to hire the next guy who's going to make more than Greg, so that's another 25-30 million, and then the next guy's going to say, I can't coach you without a guarantee on NIL. No one worth a damn is going to come here without some kind of guarantee that this won't happen to him. So that's another 20. So you're looking at $75 million to fire Greg Schiano. That's why it's not going to happen.
Yes. And when you put it in those stark terms, it's pretty bleak if you're a Rutgers fan trying to find a silver lining here. There's not a lot of positive or optimism to pull out. Yes, again, I call them lunatic not because it's ludicrous to think Greg Schiano is not the guy and he should be fired. I think increasingly that's a reasonable thing to think, right? I don't think you're crazy. I think you're crazy to think that Rutgers, a place that has historically been the lowest donated to the athletic department in the Power Five, certainly in the Big Ten, is going to suddenly find someone that's going to bankroll all of this. Because exactly, you're going to have to find a lot of money just to get rid of him, a lot of money to hire his replacement, and then a lot of money to get the roster that you have to get anyway, right? And I understand people not being sure Greg is the right guy to lead a roster, however talented, and bring them to the next level. But it's just not realistic to think that any changes could be made, again, unless there is someone out there that is going to bankroll all this. The thing with these other programs, right? Florida is a national championship winning school that they've done it in the last 20 years. They have enormous expectations. They're in the SEC, and they have donors that are willing to pay a guy to get lost after he wins. They beat Mississippi State, and they wanted Billy Napier out of there so bad that they fired him after that. They booed him off the field after they won a game.
That's
right.
That's great. It's just crazy.
And Florida State didn't fire Norvell because his buyout is going to be even more than Greg. The thing, though, is that if you look at James Franklin and you look at some of these firings, Billy Napier, what seemed to be impossible, $20 million buyout, which would have been, as of the start of this year, the second biggest in college sports history, is no longer that crazy for Florida.
Oh, it's only 20. I thought that's it. Oh, it's only 20. Oh, that's it. Really? That's it? Okay. Yeah.
Right. It's not that crazy for other schools like Penn State who could afford it, Florida who could afford it. For Rutgers, it's still an insane amount of money to think about. And again, the other question that I know people hate to hear this when they keep suggesting to fire Greg Schiano. They hate this rebuttal, but it's the most simple rebuttal that I don't have a good answer to. Who is the next guy? I am not suggesting that there's not some guy out there that could do what Greg Schiano is doing. I'm not of the belief that Greg Schiano is the only human being on planet Earth that can get Rutgers to 7-6. Yes. But who is the person out there that you can pay a lower half of the Big Ten salary to coach at this school with its historic ineptitude, this low NIL budget, and all the challenges of coaching at Rutgers, and expect him to come in and do better than the only guy who has won here for 50 years? You're asking to find Jesus Christ reincarnated, essentially. I just don't think that person exists.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. Yeah. And people forget what was, and I think this is also why people are angry, but people forget what was the motivation of hiring him in the first place? It was to get to stop humiliating us. The football program is a disgrace. We just just get to the point where you're competitive each week and you're going to a bowl game and you're beating teams you should beat, and that's where he got us. That's why I'm personally shell-shocked by this season, is that I thought they'd gotten to this level and we had advanced the conversation to, can he take it to the next level? I thought we were having a nice sort of oh, Greg, is he ever going to be the one to get it over the hump? We were sort of that had become the focus of what we're at. That's why, to me, it's so stunning to be back here in this discussion of just suck normal again.
Well, to be fair, okay, let's not take what was the worst performance of Greg 2.0 and extrapolate it to, okay, they still have not lost to a team they shouldn't. They haven't beaten the three teams they probably could have, right? The so-called next step. I agree with you there. We're in the same spot. Just because they got boat raced by Oregon doesn't mean we're suddenly at a point where they're taking a step backwards in the sense that they're losing to teams they shouldn't. If they lose to Purdue, then that's the first time in a while where you think that's a game they should not have lost, right? So let's not overcorrect. But all of your other points are taken. And again, I agree with you. Greg has done what he was here to do, which is to bring this program back to respectability. That does not mean that he has earned king status and should never, should be unquestioned and and all that stuff. And it doesn't mean that there's not someone out there that could do what he's doing now or better. Again, find me that person. Show me that person. Tell me who that person is. Give me a realistic plan. Don't just flail and say, fire this guy. And then, what's next?
Right.
Because it could get better. 100%. It could get better.
Right.
As we've seen in the post Schiano years 1.0, it can get a lot worse.
Right. Which is why I think, and this is the other half of the puzzle it out. So let's puzzle out the status quo. We're keeping Greg Schiano. And I think what's going to happen now is Kelly Zinn is going to have to work a miracle. She's going to have to prove that she is every bit the reason why they hired her. The conversation goes from, join this winning thing, this excitement, you build in here in Piscataway. Now she's calling up donors and she goes, we need a defense. Look at that's a different conversation. This loss becomes, Oregon is an example why we need more money. She's the one that's got to raise this to get the funds. We've heard the number of that she's trying to raise $10 million, $7 million for football. All right. So if she can accomplish that in short order, by the time that portal opens, it is a really, given the fundraising issues at Rutgers historically, it is an incredible accomplishment. And I'm wondering if it's going to be enough. Like, that's the new question I have now. It's like, it's certainly not the war chest that Oregon had. It's just the same kind of, all right, is that going to be enough to get this roster to a point where it's competitive next season? And that to me is going to be like a fascinating situation. I think it's the only realistic option. I think they have to play it out. I think they have to, give him at least a couple years, right, with competent leadership to prove, to show that he can do this. I'm just wondering, Brian, and it's not just one. They're not just one or two guys away, and that's what's sort of striking about that last game and the way the defense is playing. We needed a pass rush. Well, now you need a secondary overhaul too. You need everything on that defense. You could lose your quarterback too. You might lose your receiver. You've got to retain players. You got to spend money. You got to keep KJ Duff. You got to try to keep Ian Strong. It is a tough thing.
It's never enough. First of all. Second of all, I think let's establish the ideal world is Rutgers would win games, one or two games it shouldn't, all the games it should win, and be competitive against the top teams, right? That's the world we're thinking of. We're not even dreaming or talking about an Indiana scenario where you become a top team in college football, right? Just establish that realistic barometer for success, right?
I think so.
It's very bleak because, to your point, you have to replace essentially the entire defense. I cannot think of one person on that defense that could be a cornerstone for next year or beyond, right? You have to, in a realistic world, build depth behind them, because unless there are guys that are, really raw, but they feel have a high potential, I just don't see a lot of guys defensively that are going to take the next step next year. You have to replace your quarterback, hoping that AJ Serace is the guy, right? At the very least, you don't have to go in the portal for that, but you're putting a lot on a guy that has played, two college games.
Assume he is. You have to assume he is, or the whole thing.
Let's assume he is, correct. There's no other option. You're not going to get a transfer portal quarterback, especially after putting resources into developing AJ Serace. You're going to have to replace your top wide receiver, hopefully by retaining your second receiver in KJ Duff, and you have to keep your running back Antoine Raymond. Let's assume they keep those two guys, because after all, they do have $20.5 million to work with in revenue share.
They have some money, right?
Right. They have at least that floor that all other schools have, right? So you can invest more of that into retaining your top players than other schools are investing in getting better players. Anyway, the point being, even if you retain KJ Duff and you retain Antoine Raymond, you have to get a second wide receiver behind KJ Duff. Again, assuming Ian Strong goes to the NFL. You have to get a speedster to replace DT Sheffield because he's graduating. You have to get a left tackle, unless you think the guys that are coming back, like Ryder Langsdale or Dante Chin, are good enough to play there. You have to replace your entire interior defensive offensive line, center, and your two guard spots. There is so many. You're essentially replacing an entire roster, right? That is a humongous ask to do so in a way that you're able to compete and play better than you are this year. So unless that number is doubled and you get 14 million or 21 million, I think it's unrealistic, right? Which again, people don't want to hear that. People want hope in the future, but if we're being 100% honest and we're looking at the history of this program, what indication do we have that there will be a donor or donors that are coming in to save this program from being what it's been for a vast majority of its history, which is mediocre at best and oftentimes one of the worst teams in its league, right?
Hey, this is one of those situations when Lanny was on the show and there was three of us, like this was, oh, come on, guy. Like Lanny would be the positive guy. But I can assure you that if you're thinking, oh, we really miss Lanny, he would offer something. He was at the game in the crowd with his family and left in the second quarter. So don't think he would have come on here and been, and then as a Giants fan, suffer through that mess. So he had a bad weekend, Lanny, too. So I don't think he was going to wake up rosy and offer anything else. But to the point, yeah, we don't have a lot of optimism here. Sorry about that. But we do have this is interesting. We have an optimistic question. So let's go to some questions from Discord, from Twitter. And amid what I can only describe in our discourse was just like 800 like different variations of saying, no, really, can we fire him? I mean, it was like that was the tone of the Discord. We had this question. Purdue, Maryland, and Penn State all lost this weekend at Well. Together, they are a combined 9-12 this year. Can we beat all three and make a bowl? And it's funny when you think of it that way. Like I honestly thought that, looking at the schedule, they had to get off to a good start this year, and if they didn't, it was going to be a disaster. Okay, like that's an interesting point. Are we going to look like jackasses in a couple weeks if all of a sudden they're beating Penn State to go 6-6, punch a ticket for a bowl? The entire tone, the feeling of the season would change dramatically at that point. Not just a little bit. It would be like a really big accomplishment. It would certainly be better than last year, I think, because of the way it would have ended. Do you think that is a realistic scenario? Certainly realistic is tough. But let me frame it this way. Give me the odds on that. Like what percentage do you think Puzzle out win those three games?
I mean, low, right? FPI has them at 12.7% to get to 6 wins. And to get to 6 wins, you have to essentially win those 3 games, right? Mm-hmm. You have to win Maryland, Purdue, and one of Illinois and Penn State. One of them, obviously, you're going to have a better chance at, which is Penn State. So look, this is clear. They played 3 teams that are better than them in Iowa, Minnesota, and Washington. They were underdogs in all 3, I believe, or slight favorites, whatever. Like the harder mid-tier teams they've already played. Right. The easier games, Purdue and Maryland are going to be their 2 easiest games on the schedule. So those are, they still have those to play. Right. I think they can beat Purdue and Maryland. I think they should beat Purdue and Maryland. And I think that they'll have a shot. People were kind of laughing when I said that they might have a chance to beat a ranked team realistically if Illinois is still in the rankings. And they said the way they're playing, they have no shot of beating Illinois, which is fair. I will tell you this, in my opinion, even if they beat Purdue and Maryland and Penn State or Illinois, or even if they beat all 4, it's hard to think the season is a success. It's hard to think.
Really?
Because at the very least, you are matching last season. You're essentially replaying last season.
Yeah, right? But come on. That's a different schedule to consider the circumstances that happened. I mean, I think certainly 7 is a resounding success. 6, given what happened, I would certainly feel, sitting here now on October 20th at 10:05 a.m., it would be hard not to characterize it as if that success is not the right word, an impressive turnaround certainly would be.
It would be an impressive turnaround just like last year. You're talking about sitting here on October 20th. Just picture yourself on December 27th, sitting in the open air press box of Yankee Stadium for another Pinstripe Bowl and another win over a middling ACC team, maybe a Syracuse, for example. It's going to feel like 2 years ago, and it's going to feel like last year. So yes, it's a win in the sense that it's not a step back, which sitting right here on October 20th, this season very well could be a major step back, but it's not a step forward. You're not taking steps forward.
The problem is that's
what I mean.
Yeah, I hear you. The problem is I don't have a lot of faith in it just because of what we've seen. And this is not, that defense was not a 1-game blip, right? Like 750 yards. Oh, you could shrug it off. They give up 500 yards to one player against Washington. A good player, okay, very talented young quarterback. I get it. Damon Williams, looks really impressive, but 500 yards to one player. They look bad. And we forget, like I was thinking about this. They looked bad against Ohio in the first game. We were like, the defense. We were shrugging it off like, Greg did say it's going to be a work in progress. Remember that's a conversation in the pod. Go back and listen to us then. We were like, okay, work in progress. Ohio gained, whatever the hell, 450 yards. I will say this: the one positive, the one thought I have, and I don't think Greg Schiano has lost a team in a long time. Like he hasn't had a season where it just went away. And the last time I can think of it was 2010. And that was they, the one blip when they didn't make a bowl back then, and that was because Eric LeGrand's injury year. And I think you can, a lot of ways, I think we did not realize how devastating it was to the team at the time. Looking at it in hindsight, certainly we do now. And I think so. You can kind of put that one aside. I can't think of a year that he has just completely, like, the team gave up and threw in the towel, and just he hasn't that hasn't happened. So if I'm looking for one positive, it is that to think that. They're going to keep playing hard. A lot of people made fun of them for saying they were playing hard at the end of that game, but that's sort of like, that's why he's not ripping the players. That's not why he's not going scorched earth in these press conferences, because that's how he keeps the team. And I think, if there's one positive, I will say that they're going to have a chance to do it, at least, because that hasn't happened yet. And I don't think it will.
Right. Again, we talked about this before. This could very well be 2008. Where they have an elite offense, they have high expectations because of continuity, they stink it up in the first half of the year, everyone counts them out, and then they make a run at the end, make a bowl game, and everyone kind of looks back at the year as that was a winning record, and like that's the best case scenario, is that they even Eric talked about that, like they've done it in the past, to your point, and if they do it again, I will feel like we're just reliving Greg Schiano 2.0 all over again, outside of the one magical year in 06, because it feels like things just keep. If there's a Groundhog Day, they keep repeating. But again, I just don't, I know we talked about how we would feel about it if that happened. I don't think we're going to have those conversations in December, because I just think you're asking for a miracle to win 3 more games, let alone all 4 of those toss-up games.
Right. Okay. This was a good question. And I think this, because it gets to the kind of wild card part of this. We've seen coaches fired at premium programs after failing to meet lofty expectations. What is our new administration's pain tolerance levels coming from a school that expected to compete for SEC and national championships? Is this the kind of game that gets them looking elsewhere for new leadership? I don't know. And this is where I say the wild card in this. And I actually was talking to some people about this. Like, is there a 5% chance that Bill Tate, the new president, my new friend, the win guy, you can call him, like, if you have the only thing we've seen from him, essentially the co-athletic director of this university, like, he is the X factor. Will he see something like that? If this goes to 3-9, if it goes the other way, if he does lose this team, like, is there a moment where the president says, I'm not doing this. I'm 64. I'm done. And fires him. And I think it's funny. Like, I don't think it's a non-zero thing. I don't think it's going to happen. I want to be clear about it. But like, that to me is the one X factor. Like, Kelly Zinn's got a plan. I would be stunned if anything changes what she's doing. She seems like a very task-oriented. This is how we're going to do it. We figured it out. We're going to puzzle it out. We're going to give him money. We're going to, he doesn't have the resources. We'll make sure he does. But I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think William Tate and Kelly Zinn got to where they are because they are smart people who consider things without emotion. And I think I will point you to 2 comments that each of them made. William Tate calling Greg Schiano per capita the best coach in America, and Kelly Zinn essentially saying that he's had to do a lot of this work himself, and it's amazing what he's done considering what he's. So what does that mean? They have access to data. We do not. They know the NIL numbers that we do not, both of Rutgers and the competitors. They have the full scope that we do not, right? And I think they're smart enough to realize that whatever questions the fan base and we may have about Greg Schiano, it's not his fault entirely. It's not like he has Ohio State's budget and he's producing Purdue results, right? So to answer the question, what are the odds? I would put them at 0.1%. There's always a chance that one of these two could have a psychotic break and just decide to do something crazy that doesn't make sense. But I just think there's no reasonable explanation that one could have for firing Greg Schiano, given the resources he has to work with, given how much money they would owe him if they do fire him. There is just no way any reasonable person could do that and explain it in a way that makes sense.
3-9 doesn't explain it. I think at 3-9 or 4-8, it's not 0.1. It goes to like 4 or 5%. And just because of what I said, you've got this guy who's just, we don't know William Tate. We only know what we see. And the one thing we see is win. Like that's the one thing we see.
Okay, I will give you the one scenario where I kind of agree with you. They go to Columbus and lose 222-0, tying the NCAA record for the worst loss of all time. And then they come home against Penn State, who is on its fourth string quarterback, and its interim coach also gave up, just threw in the towel. And now they have State College High School's coach leading the team, and then they win 98-0. That is the scenario where I see them saying, "Okay, this is over." Otherwise, do I want to see chaos? Would it be fun to see chaos? Yes, but do you want to be a fan of a program, of a school that just does crazy shit? I mean, that's probably not a good thing, right?
No, not a good thing. I just think there's a point. It could get to a point where it's not completely crazy, and that this is, and I don't have any information. I'm just telling you what I see from him. That's the one. And there's another X factor too that we haven't talked about. The other X factor is that Greg Schiano makes this decision, and you quoted two quotes to me. One to me about the per capita quote, everything that Kelly Zinn says. The other quote to me was when he says, "I will make that decision." This was a couple years ago. Like, I will make that decision when I'm done coaching. It was Greg Schiano's way of saying, like, Pat Hobbs isn't this, and that time was Pat Hobbs isn't deciding how long I'm coaching. Jonathan Holloway is not deciding how long I'm coaching. The fans are not deciding. Greg Schiano is the one who's deciding that. And I think there is, again, it's not a high percentage, but it is a non-zero chance that we get to the end of this year and he decides that he's tired of, running into the wall of this. I don't think it's going to happen. But there have been a couple of times we've seen it. Like there a couple of seasons ago, he just looked like he was just exhausted at the end of the year. Like, he just looked like a guy. And I wondered then coming out of like the Maryland game press conference, I'm like how long is he going to want to do this? And he's getting near 60 now. It's he's 17 years. Like, he's not coaching until he's 70, right? Like, and again, I don't think he's going to do it at the end of this year. I don't think he wants to walk out on a bad year. But maybe in the other scenario that, as we were talking about it, this thing does. If he does get to the point where they're 6-6 and beat Penn State, I don't know. It's interesting. Just something else to put out there as we wildly speculate about things we have no answers for.
So what I would say is that I 100% agree with you that the only way Greg Schiano leaves is that his contract expires or he retires, because I just don't see. I think Greg has done enough for this program. He's been here long enough, and more importantly, he has enough sway in this building that he would never get fired. He would be asked to retire, or he decides himself he's going to retire, right? I cannot imagine him getting fired. We're talking about technicalities here. But I don't think it would be this year, because for the first time after fighting this battle by himself, after being Sisyphus climbing that rock up a hill by himself for years, there's actually an administration behind him and a plan. It would just feel weird for him to, throw in the towel now. And to what Eric Grant told us 2 weeks ago, like, I just don't see Greg deciding at 59 years old that he's done. What else is he going to do? He's going to go mow a lawn? Like, what? I just don't see it. I think he's pretty resolute on seeing this thing through. And I think he feels good about what the direction of the administration behind him is. So I would be shocked. I would be legitimately, and I know you throw that word a lot, I would be legitimately shocked if Greg Schiano was not the head coach of Rutgers in 12 months from now.
All right, let's do a couple more questions and then wrap this thing up. And we didn't answer this last week. I want to answer it now. It's the private equity question. Is Rutgers in favor of the Big Ten right sale? And if so, can they be pressed on why they're willing to accept an insane 20-year term? If you're not following the story, it's one of the bigger stories in college sports business. The Big Ten thinking about, and they push back on the words private equity, but thinking about selling a stake in the league essentially for $2.4 or $2.2 billion to the California Pension Fund, I believe is what I was reading. It would infuse a lot of cash immediately into all 18 schools. The pushback right now are from USC and Michigan to doing it, from everything I've read, for obvious reasons. I think they clearly believe, rightly so, that they are, pulling more weight in the conference than Rutgers and Maryland. So why would Rutgers be interested? And I don't know that Rutgers is interested, but I think obviously anything from my standpoint, and from a Rutgers standpoint, that keeps the Big Ten together is a good thing for Rutgers. Like, they don't want a super conference to be on the wrong end of it, because if this is what happens, they're not getting the invitation. Like, if they pick the top 30 teams for a super conference. Rutgers isn't going to be one of them. So one, I think they like the idea of status quo with the Big Ten. And two, I think we know all of the problems Rutgers has financially. I think an infusion of cash right now could solve a ton of problems, and not just roster, and not just, we're not going to use it to pay off a buyout, but also facilities, a lot of things that want to get done the people think they want to get done in Piscataway. They can't do it because of funding. So I think that those are the two reasons why, certainly if I was a Rutgers athletic director, I'd be like, yeah, let's get the cash.
I don't think Rutgers has much of a say in this. I think kind of whatever the Big Ten decides to do is not going to be in consultation with Rutgers.
But they're a yes vote, though, right? I mean,
right. But I mean, come on, let's be real here. Rutgers has almost no say in this. Let's just be completely honest here. If I'm Rutgers, do I want it from a practical standpoint to have an infusion of $200 million or whatever it is, and essentially have a lot more to work with? Probably. Do I agree personally with Michigan's regents who said this is essentially a payday loan and that it's short-term good, but long-term disastrous? Yes. I don't think any of these schools should want to do this, but for some reason they think selling their soul to private equity for the short-term game is going to work out, because that's all college administrators do. It's they worry about covering their own ass and making things work for their term, and the future can, whatever. The future is too far away. I'll be retired by then. The school can figure it out. So to answer your question, do I think Rutgers would be in favor of it? Yes. Insofar as every smaller school would be in favor of it, because it would, in theory, raise their floor. Do I think Rutgers' opinion on this matter makes any difference whatsoever? No, I don't.
All right. Let's wrap it up with questions there. There are similar topics, but mostly it's repeating stuff about Robb Smith and staff issues and NIL that we've talked about 8 billion times. Yeah, and we'll be back later in the week. We have another podcast. We can rehash the same 6 topics. Anything else going on? It was a big homecoming day. I don't want to forget this. Like, the halftime show was great. Like, I loved the Hamilton 10-year extravaganza from when I was able to watch about it. The band came through, the lights. The band at night is fantastic with the lights. They figured something out there. I feel bad. It must be like, when you go on to your halftime, you go out at 42.3 and everyone's already left or is leaving to beat the traffic. I don't know why you would leave to beat the traffic at 42.3, stay to beat the traffic at 42.3. Everyone's already tied up the thing. I feel bad for the band having to go out there. I thought they were great. Stadium operations were great. I still continue to get emails, and we both got one from Rutgers Robb, he's called, just destroying the getting into the stadium, the traffic, the rack, the buses. That kind of stuff remains a problem. And I'm just very interested because it's clearly on Kelly Zinn's radar. And you've talked to her about this, like that, trying to solve that problem remains to be a big one.
Yes. Look, I don't care about halftime or TV timeout entertainment, or I don't care about any of that. I think all that is nice and well and good. That doesn't solve the problems on the field. That's not going to get people in the stands. That's supplementary. If we keep pointing to that as
a band. You hate the band. You're a band hater. That's what I heard when you say that. I don't care about halftime. They did Hamilton. Come on.
I don't like Hamilton.
Throwing away my shot.
Here's the trend that I'm seeing often on these podcasts is that we talk about how bad the football team is and how good the boardwalk and the halftime is. That is a sign of a horrendous football program. If I am Greg Schiano and he's somehow wasting time listening to this podcast, which I know he isn't, I would be throwing my AirPods across the room. Who cares about all that stuff? If I was a fan going to games, my priorities would be: 1, is the football team good? 2, am I going to be stuck in a 2-hour line to get a bus from the rack to the stadium and be an hour late to the game? 3, is the parking situation getting in and out going to be better if I'm driving into the game? I think this was a rough game for the traffic experts to be there, to your point, because this was not a normal post-game flow. There was probably no traffic after the game. They do have to fix that, by the way, and I think they're very intent on trying to find solutions. I know people have talked about a pedestrian bridge over the Johnson Park, whatever. That's not going to happen. Let's be clear. That's just not. It's not financially feasible.
Memorial River Road Bridge. Why is enough? I don't understand.
It would be, I think, a good solution. I think that Rutgers has a long list of things it has to pay for. And I don't think paying for a pedestrian bridge and figuring out that logistics is high on that list.
Hang on. I'm going to get my checkbook out. I'm not going to donate to NIL, but
if you have the kind of money it takes to build a River Road Bridge, Steve, you should not be doing this podcast. You should be in the Maldives somewhere. Anyway, I don't care about all that stuff. That's all well and good, and I'm glad that fans that bring their families enjoy it and all that stuff. I don't care. I think most fans just want to see a good football team, and all that other stuff is fun. I don't care if Simon Says is doing a first quarter timeout show with the Pickle and the Rizzler. I love the Rizzler.
The Rizzler was there. The Rizzler was in the press box. Did you see the Rizzler in the press box?
He is smaller.
The Rizzler is pretty small. I was surprised. Like I initially did not recognize him.
He's a 10-year-old child.
What?
Of course he's small.
He's like 11 though, right? I thought he's 11. How old?
He's 10 or 11 years old. Yes, he's a child. Of course he's small.
I mean, but he was really small. I mean, like he was a small child. I think he was a little bigger. The Rizzler was a little bigger. The Rizzler was, saw the Rizzler.
Anyway, I guess just to move on from
I gotta find silver linings, man. Like the Rizzler. I'm all for having the band. I didn't need the Simon Says guy though. Although who won? The Pickle won. The Simon Says that was fun.
The Pickle won, yes. Yeah. So if you want a positive, rowing, they rang the bells on Friday because they won a very famous regatta in England, beat Newcastle University. Take that, Gordies. That's all very well and good. That's nice. But homecoming week was absolutely brutal for Rutgers. Absolutely brutal. Men's soccer lost both its games. Field hockey lost both its games. Volleyball lost both its games. Women's soccer went 1-1. If women's soccer had not won on Sunday, Rutgers would have went 0 in every sport on homecoming weekend.
What is Kelly Zinn's record now? Remember we were tracking that at some point. We're like, oh look, she's 5-0. Ooh.
Well, I decided that I like her after doing the profile, so I stopped tracking the record because
good point.
While it was good, because it was a rough week of all the weeks, and I understand why they did RNIL this week. It makes perfect sense, like timing wise. But for them to go 1-17 or whatever the number was, that's just not great. So look, you want to be positive. There's not a lot of positives to come out of this week. I'll be honest, but
you were there for the ringing of the bells with Crew, right? Answer me this. How is it possible? Why? I think this every time they ring the bell. Like this is like a Henry himself, Colonel Henry Rutgers donated the bell to Rutgers, and they're going to ring the bell, and it's a big ceremony. Why is the bell? Why is the rope for a bell like in a hall, like a broom closet at the end of the hall at Old Queens? Like they always like open in this door, and they're kind of cramped in there with the rope. And like, why don't we have like if I were not spending money on the bridge across River Road, I would find a good spot for that bell. I'd find a better way where the aesthetically it looks better. There you go. It's another problem you could solve if you're listening.
Well, I think the whole point of this is tradition, right? And I think the bell is the way it was when Henry Rutgers donated the money and they built it. And
he said, I want to put this bell. I want to put the rope to this bell in the closet. That's what I'm bequeathing you this bell, but I demand that the rope be hidden behind behind the vacuum cleaner.
They did not have vacuum cleaners during Henry Rutgers' time, by the way. And I think Henry Rutgers didn't have a strong opinion on the architectural decisions of the bell. I think they put the bell there. It's the way it was because they used to ring it to tell people it was time to switch classes or whatever, or something, whatever they did back in 1844, whatever. The point being, it's the way it is now as it was 150, 200 years ago. And I think that's the whole charm, is that you get to ring the bell the way it was intended to be rung. And I don't think Rutgers rings the bell enough. I think everyone will tell you that. I think Kelly Zinn wants them to ring the bell that much more often. So they brought her there at the end of her first visit when she was looking at campus and just trying to decide to take the job. I think they want to ring it more often. I think if a bigger sport, if a football, if a men's basketball ever goes to ring the bell, they will fill up that quad. But I guess to end this on a positive note, I know you want the positive. I don't think it can get much worse than this. So it's only up from here, Steve. For everybody.
That's good. That's certainly positive, Brian. Thanks for that. Thanks for that peppy ending to the pod. Maybe one day we'll ring the bell. What will we have to do?
I don't think I've done.
You win the Pulitzer Prize, they'd let you ring the bell. You're an alum.
Right. There are thousands of alums. I've done nothing to earn a ring. If I ring the bell, the value of ringing the bell goes down 1,000,000,000%. It'd be like the 2008 stock market crash of the bell's market value.
They just said you wanted to ring the bell more. Maybe that'll be it. That Kelly Zinn feature was so good. We're going to let you ring the bell. All right. Let's end there at the vision of Brian putting on the gloves opening that closet door, climbing into the closet, and grabbing the rope to ring the bell, because that's a very positive sign to sign off on. We'll be back later in the week, we think, with a guest picker to predict the Purdue game. Rutgers fans, hang in there. It could get better. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Rutgers Rant, sponsored by the Heldrich Hotel. Head to nj.com/Rutgers for more Scarlet Knight content.